certain things obviously came out of it, certain language that you can use to teach your students. And, for example, question forming,
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
I mean, that's the obvious one. Teaching your students how to make WH questions versus yes-no questions.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that could come out of it is asking questions using proper intonation.
Mm-hmm. Pronunciation.
Right? So, does your voice go up or down, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is more appropriate, right?
There's also, the other thing I was thinking is there's a very nice sub-skill of speaking skills in that, that idea of fluency and having to think very, very quickly. Because although you can anticipate, you might be able to anticipate, depending on what object you choose, that other people are going to ask you questions on. That idea of having to come up with things quite quickly, I think it's also a very good skill to focus on.
Right. Okay, so with this type of activity, I mean, it's engaging. It has people talk about themselves, which they love doing. They get to practice.
Clearly. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, we're at 7 o'clock now.
All right, enough about your watch.
Okay, so a lot of good language can come out of this that you can work with, of course, and that is the point. Stuff that emerges naturally from the activity, right?
Yeah.
So those are the 3 activities that I'm going to go over, and Tanya is soon going to give you a couple of suggestions about things you can consider. So I'm just going to hand things over to her now.
Okay. All right, let me just get my PowerPoint ready. Okay, you should be able to see my screen. There we go. Okay, now very briefly, I mean, the dogme style of teaching, the dogme approach to teaching, I mean, it hasn't just completely been embraced immediately, because you are talking about people being willing to go into a classroom without a lot of preparation. Some teachers find learner-centered teaching a little intimidating. Obviously we're used to working, many people are used to working from course books and materials and things like that. And so there have been a lot of, I suppose, contrary thoughts or criticisms lodged against the dogme. And so I just wanted to touch on a few, because I do think that it does come with a few risks that I think are important to focus on. So course books. Obviously, if the students have paid for the course book, you can't completely ignore it without getting some kind of flack or criticism either from them or the management. Now, there is a section in Teaching Unplugged on working with the course book, but I think that at the end of the day, it's the idea of looking at what the topic is, just making sure that activities are lifted off the page, having a look at the activities that are gap fills or restricted written practice, and have students do that for homework. So just kind of keeping the course book in the back of your mind is something not to completely chuck out, but can even guide you a little bit with some of the topics, and even some of the speaking activities in course books can be incorporated reasonably well. Obviously always thinking about how they can be much more student-centered and have the content be more learner-generated. Being aware of the limit to the language you bring in, because again the dogme approach is focused on the language that emerges within the classroom. And I think it's important that the teacher be aware of what they are bringing in and what they're focusing on. Particularly with higher levels, you might be a little bit concerned with the range, the variety, the formality. What kind of language are you actually going to be focusing on? I'm going to jump down a little bit to the experience and knowledge base of the teacher, because I think this is a pretty big one. For newer teachers or teachers who don't have a lot of experience, it can be a little tricky working within this approach, because you've got confidence issues. Now, some people are naturally confident and they don't have that problem at all, which is fantastic. But the idea of not wanting things to be too light or fluffy, that students are having lots of practice, they're obviously very personally engaged, lots of speaking, but you also want to make sure that students walk out of the classroom feeling like they've learned something. And I think that can be a bit of an issue if a teacher doesn't know how to exploit the language that's coming out, how to clarify students' questions or errors that come up. Error clarification, I think, is important, and also the choices of language that come out. Depending on how much you can anticipate what language will be generated by the activity will depend on how much you can at least get some idea before the activity of what language you're gonna choose. So I think the choices of the language are actually pretty key to making sure that learning opportunities are still being focused on. Resistance to methodology, yes, I think that again, if you're teaching, it's not immediately applicable for all contexts, but depending on how entrenched your students are with their past learning experiences or how resistant they are to lessons that are mainly speaking activities. I think that could be an issue, but in my opinion, so long as things are gently introduced or students always see the validity and the value, the learning outcomes of activities, generally that resistance fades pretty quickly. Another issue that comes up, I think, is the development of writing skills. There are quite a few writing skills, I think, that do need a fair amount of preparation. There's especially if you're going to be exploiting a reading text before you go on to the writing skills, then obviously that's going to require some preparation. But again, someone who's aware of that can kind of be flipping in and out of the dogme approach and still be thinking about the topics, thinking about the ideas, and then the next day maybe bring in something that's relevant to what they did the day before, but might need a bit more preparation with the writing skills. Also the reading of text genres, so making sure again that if you ask students to bring in pieces of writing, that you're also aware of providing them with a range of genres, so people aren't constantly just bringing in advertising, for example, or small newspaper clippings, but that you get a wider range of what comes into the classroom. And the last thing there is actually an article David wrote. Hi, David. I think you're still here with us. And I thought it was very good, actually. I read it recently when you sent it. Thanks for sending it, David. And I do recommend anybody reading this, because the thing I really, really like about this is the first article that I've read where teacher is directly experimenting with the dogme approach and then reflecting on their own process. So David talks about how he first heard about it, how he felt about it, and then how he started applying it in the classroom and what happened with elementary level learners and advanced level learners. And I thought it was very interesting, some issues. For example, I hadn't thought about the writing issue before reading this article. So if anybody, I'll leave that up there for a bit if you want to write it down. I think it's very well written, and it outlines very nicely from a personal perspective someone's journey into using the dogme approach. Okay. Right. Okay. So, so that's it. All right. So that's the end of our formal presentation, if you like, of Teaching Unplugged. Thank you very much for that, Tyson. I think that the activities you chose are excellent, and it did give a really nice flavor to the types of things you can find in the book.
Yeah, I mean, I wish we could have done more, but we always go over already.
I know. Apologies to you folks, and also to Scott. Scott, I hope you're still with us.
He's unmuted now. You can say something, Scott.
I think it's midnight. He actually might have fallen asleep. Oh, there you are! I'm so sorry. Listening to us prattle on about your book here. But yes, so if you are interested in purchasing a copy of this very interesting book, as the information is there, you can go on our new website, you can email us, and if you do order a copy before 10 tomorrow, you can receive a 20% discount. Just before we start speaking with Scott, the next webinar is with Jamie Keddy. He's the author of Images, and this is another really interesting book to give us a peek into creative and engaging ways of using different areas of media in the classroom and looking at how effective images can be and exploiting them in different ways. So I hope you guys can join us then. We'll be back at our regular time at 6 o'clock.
Well, the regular time's actually 6:30, but
oh, yeah,
it's a little bit different this time.
Oh, yeah. Yes, because he's in the Czech Republic,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, that's true.
Right, all these people are right. Okay.
Anyhow.
And that's us. So
hello.
There's the three of us. Nicole's the one in the middle. I'm on the end.
Okay, so I'd like to give Scott kind of an open mic now. Scott, if you would like, before there's any questions, if you would like to say anything about your book or about what we've talked about, or say we're all crap.
No, I'm terribly impressed. I'm going to rush out and buy 100 copies. I'm so impressed by the presentation.
Good.